Hi, everyone. We're going to review the claim that the Gospel of the Holy 12 is valid, and we're going to show you it's an obvious fraud. Unfortunately, a lot of people have been told this is a valid book, and I think that what happens is if you jump into this book and you don't read the preface, you've made a mistake. And that's I once read it that way, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a great discovery. Look at all this stuff. It claimed when you first read it that this was based on an Aramaic text found in Tibet. But then later, if you read the preface, you would realize not so. So anyway, that's the whole thing, is it was deliberately set up so that you would probably skip the preface. You won't look at the opening stuff, and you would just read, oh, it comes from an Aramaic text. This is allowing us to recover the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. That's what that's what it seemed to me it was doing. So I was taken in a little bit years ago looking at this, and then but once I saw the preface, I go, oh, how did I waste all this time reading this book? Anyway, you'll see it yourself. It's a very clever, very good fraud because it uses, by the time this was first written in 1902, there were 49 quotes from the Hebrew Matthew that had been recovered. And so I had done that research and found that, and then I started reading this, and I go, here's I found like several, all mixed in. So when you're reading this, you're going, this is it's a coincidence. I thought it was just an amazing coincidence. Here's all the Hebrew Matthew sites that have just come up, and then it was weaved into a story of a gospel, and so it seemed to be a complete gospel. So just so you know, it's a very, very seductive document. It makes you, if you want to recover the Hebrew Matthew, this is giving you all of the juice, all of the excitement, and with all of the clarity, because there's not a comma missing. There are no breaks. This is a perfect Aramaic text. If this was original. But wait till you find out what's really going on. Okay, so I hope that's a good introduction. So people who fall for this, it's not just you. It was designed to defraud you, but you have to see it for your own eyes, and I'm going to show it to you. Okay, so I just want to say that if you want to learn about the Hebrew Matthew, the place to go is the original Gospel of Matthew. It's 90% free for viewing at Google Books. Books.google.com. You can just go there, you can look it up, and the volume 2 has the appendices, and I want to show you what is stated there. So in Appendix D of volume 2 of the original Gospel of Matthew, page 79, it has a statement that the fraudulent Gospel of the Holy 12. So this gives you a synopsis of that it's fraudulent, and I'm now going to read this to you, but not from the screenshot. I'm going to go have a typed up version read. I'm going to read you a typed up version. Okay, so this is what we read. This is a fraud. The Gospel of the Holy 12, GOHT, published in the late 1800s, is an elaborate hoax. It has the highest concentration of the 49 quotes in the early church literature dating 100 to 400 AD, taken from the Gospel according to the Hebrews of Matthew, GATHM. But since GOHT was written after these quotes were fully vetted in the 1800s, it had the opportunity to present these 49 quotes with new, unfounded material so as to deceive the reader into thinking the new material was also part of the original Matthew. Such tripe included Jesus being once married. However, carefully placed in the preface, and I would like to say deceptively placed, where you wouldn't see it. You would see the fact that it was allegedly based on an Aramaic text, and then when you're reading on, you would have seen what was really going on. And in the third edition, it's just completely much more forward about where and how this was developed. We're going to look at the third edition. And anyway, so however, carefully placed in the preface was the admission that parts of this translation came via visions and divine messages over several centuries, including from Emanuel Swendenbourg of 1688-1772. No differentiation is placed in the text between the purported Aramaic text discovered in Tibet and such illegitimate sources. Thus, this fact renders the entire Gospel of the Holy 12 from the late 1800s a worthless document. More than worthless. It's a fraud. And, as I'll show you and prove to you, it's a violation of Matthew 24. The same thing that we're citing against Paul's invalidity, this is doing the same thing. It's private rooms, Jesus or other people are talking to Swendenbourg or Mr. Osley, the guy who claims to have found the Aramaic text and yet never produced it. He is doing nothing different than the Mormon founder Joseph Smith or Paul. Just in a private room, he's going to come up with all this stuff, and we'll see that in a minute. And I advocate, if you are wed to the Gospel Holy 12, you need to go to books.google.com and download the free PDF. So you read it in the original format it was designed for. So there was the 1902 version I'd seen, and then there's online versions of it. But you need to read it with the book, with the preface, because without the preface, you don't have anything. And the 1923 preface goes back and gives you the 4 witnesses who can verify that Mr. Ostley said he was getting it from vision and dreams, and then they're going to say, you know, we believe him, these 4 people in this preface. So this is nothing different than Joseph Smith, but he had like 12 people say they believed that he got it through goggles or special glasses, that he could read this text on a metallic type surface, which then disappears into heaven. And he, you know, so yeah, this is the Matthew 24 principle is designed to protect us from people like Joseph Smith, the Gospel of the Holy 12, and Paul. So we need to use it. It's a defense for us for everything like this. Okay, so I downloaded it just today, just now, but I had it from years ago. But I wanted to make sure I got the current one, whatever it was. So this is the face sheet. It says it's written down and published by the late Reverend G.J. Owsley. And this one says it's a new edition with introduction and notes by E. Francis Udney of the priest in the Liberal Catholic Church, printed and published by Edson's, London, 1923. And I think you can get a flavor of who this mentality, the kind of people who made up this fraud, is just by reading the invocation at the beginning. O Master of the Great White Lodge, Lord of all the religions of the world, come down again to the earth that needs you and help the nations that are longing for your presence. So for anyone who has any awareness, I don't even have to tell you what that sounds like, where it's coming from. Okay, and this is the introduction, and you'll see I put Matthew 24 to the side because you'll see that's important. And so this is the survivors who knew Mr. Owsley, and they're going to explain why. Well, let's just read it. The Reverend G.J. Owsley, by whom this gospel was written down, was a son of Sir Ralph Owsley, KCB, and was born in 1835 and died in 1906. He was a priest, first in the established Church of Ireland and afterwards in the Catholic Apostolic Church. The third edition, and last before the present one, appeared in or about 1902 and contained a preface in which Mr. Owsley said that the gospel had been received by him in numerous fragments at different times from Emmanuel Swendenbourg, who was seen by trustworthy clairvoyance and afterwards identified from a portrait shown to them. And now these are the 4 people who are the witnesses, just like Joseph Smith had witnesses, who could say this is what he said it was happening to him. He was getting these little visions from a dead man named Emmanuel Swendenbourg. Not from God, but from some philosopher. Okay, so the 4 witnesses were Anna Kingsford, Edward Maitland, 1, 2, and a priest. I wonder if this adds up to 4. And a priest of a former century, giving his name as Placidus of the Franciscan order, afterwards a Carmelite. So that sounds like this guy's also a dead person who's now talking to him. So the priest is not even a living person. He's from a past century. So this is all confused, and I'm not sure it doesn't add up to 4 yet. Let's see. By them it was translated. So these are his translators. These people, I guess these other people. By them it was translated and given to the editors in the flesh to be supplemented in their proper places where indicated from the 4 Gospels, the authorized versions, revised where necessary by the same. So what it seems to be saying is that when you see the things that coincide with our current Gospels, which if you read the Gospel of Holy 12, it looks like it uses the substratum of our, what you call the King James Bible or a normal Bible, and then adds in stuff to weave the whole story together. It takes those 49 quotes I was talking to you about and weaves them in. Then it says, by the divine spirit was the gospel communicated to the 4 above mentioned. Okay, so I really am not sure it ever was 4. I see 3, unless Emmanuel Swendenbourg counts for 1. So it really is just two human beings who are alive, Anna Kingford and Edward Maitland, and then there's this priest from a former century named Placidus, and maybe Emanuel Swendenbourg counts for another person, so that adds up to 4. So it's kind of puzzling what they mean by the 4. But anyway, by the divine spirit was the gospel communicated to the 4 above mentioned, and by them translated and given to the writers. By editors and writers, he meant apparently himself. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, apparently himself. It goes down here a little bit. At any rate, there is nothing to show that anyone else was concerned in the production. So it's these 4 people. Those 2 people that were humans, Edwin Swedenbourg, who was dead, and then a priest from a prior century, Mr. Placidus. So there's 2 people who are really alive, 2 people who are speaking in visions, and they're translating. So somehow they're present in the present time. I mean, this is borderline crazy, right? Insane. If you read with some care. And that's the whole thing, ladies and gentlemen. You've got to read things with care and never skip a preface. This is a great lesson because I wasted a lot of time reading the other parts and thought, oh, this is a great book. Wow, we found everything. It's like the treasure trove. And it says it's because I read the first paragraph and it just said he got it from an Aramaic text, which has disappeared. So there's just nothing to this whole story. But anyway, I think I'm going to skip the next part there, just nonsense. But then in the bottom it says, in a subsequent pamphlet, Mr. Ousley said that the unseen communicators impressed the text. So unseen, yes, Swendenbourg and this priest from a prior century, Placidus, yeah, they're unseen. Is that what he means? Or the other 2 people who are actually human beings? I can't tell. It's just a fraud of unbelievable proportions, right? Unseen, not in my private study nor in any seance, but for the most part by their direction, walking or sitting with my notebook in the open air and often in dreams and visions of the night. And if the reality of their presence with me influencing me, I am as certain as I am of my own existence and identity. So yeah, I think he's talking about these 2 people who are not living in our current century, Edwin Swedenbourg and this priest from a prior century. These are the other 2. So he's got 2 people who are human beings. The people have actually first and last names. And then these other 2 people who aren't really alive, but they're in his private study. Well, I guess he's saying they're not in my private study. Well, what is he saying? Hold on, I got to go back. Okay, so these editors are quoting Mr. Ousley explaining that he wasn't saying these people are in his private study, but they're present. And like, they're not physically present, nor did he conjure them up in a seance, okay? This is what he's saying. But for the most part, by their direction, walking or sitting with my notebook in the open air and often in dreams and visions at night, they were there. They were there as real as reality can be, influencing me with their presence. I'm as certain of that as I am of my own existence or identity. So when somebody has to say that is, they really mean is, I know they're not really there, but it felt exactly like if they were really there. So he's talking about this priest named Placidus from a different century and Edwin Swendenbourg. He's not talking about the 2 human beings. So he's literally got, maybe you could say they're ghosts. So I'm going to call them ghosts. He's got 2 ghosts that he feels are as real, and they're guiding him and giving him the words to write this book out. The Gospel of the Holy 12. Now, further, again, I put Matthew 24 to the side because this is exactly what this is about. This is someone saying, I've encountered as real can be these beings in a private place who are going to tell me the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, maybe they're not saying they are Christ, but what they're channeling is the gospel of Jesus Christ. So it's sort of the same, really, because it's the only difference is they are admitting that they're an intermediary. They're not saying they're Christ, but they're saying this is the words of Christ. These are the words about Christ. So to me, it's the same difference. Anyway. So here's the next quote. Mr. Ousley told Mr. Hart that he used to receive visits during the night, quote, in the stillness of the quiet hour, while the night was in the midst of her course. And that's end of the quote. From the above mentioned Carmelite priest. Okay, so the Carmelite priest was the priest from a different century named Placidus, the guy who's not really real, but this guy's appearing to him in visions and dreams, who then shows him a scroll which he invited him to read and which appeared to be an original Christian gospel. So he's getting to see an original Christian gospel that isn't really real from a person who isn't really real either, from a different century who he's visiting with him at night. So this is sort of like what I was just saying. It sounds a lot like a really Matthew 24 case where somebody's claiming to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ. Maybe he's not saying he's Jesus, but he's conveying the impression that this is the true authorized gospel of Jesus. Unbelievable. Okay, and let's continue reading. As regards the statement that the text was received, quote, often in dreams and visions in the night, close quote, there are numerous references in the scripture to the communication of knowledge in that way. So now these editors want to say, hey, we trust him, and here's why. For instance, quote, now a thing was secretly brought to me. This is quoting Job. Brought to me, and mine ear received a little thereof, and thoughts from the vision of the night when deep sleep falls on men. Okay, but Job is claiming it's a dream. He's not saying it's the word of God. You're saying you're getting the word of God through dreams and visions. And it's by someone showing you a scroll that doesn't even physically exist, and you can't produce that. And you're not saying you could because it was all in vision and dream with this priest Placidus who was from a different century, which, by the way, could have been the first century. And I think that's what he really meant because Placidus is a Roman name. So I think the idea or suggestion was he was from the first century, and that's how you could recover the gospel going all the way back. But that's a whole nother problem. Anyway, so this Job passage doesn't prove someone who claims to have vision and dreams is telling you the truth. He's a charlatan, if you ask me. All right, so in case you don't realize how well this fraud is done and what is perpetuating, you just have to kind of start looking at it. And we're just going to look at a few things quickly. Here's chapter 1, verse 1, or whatever. It's going to start telling you the story in chronological order. It reads like perfect English. It reads smoothly. It has no typos. It's not missing any text. If it was an Aramaic ancient text, which is what I thought this was originally, I thought this must have been the best preserved text because it was 100%, there's no mistakes, there's no gaps, there's no damaged portion. And then now I realize, well, he's being channeled by a priest who doesn't really exist. He's from a different century. And then Mr. Swendenbourg. Okay, so just to show you how this guy worked. What a con. What a charlatan. All right, and here's chapter 4. Jesus is born in a cave, and he calls him Jesu Maria. I don't get that. What's that about? He was born in a cave, so he has to change something up. Like oh, well, you believe he's born in a manger. Nah, that's not where he was born. Now the birth of Jesu Maria, the Christ, was on the wise. That should have tipped me off. I thought maybe there was some reason for it. When you want to believe, you cast aside some of your doubt and you just read because you're just so excited. It sounds so good. It's too good to be true. Remember that rule. If it's too good to be true, it's not really true. Here's one that should catch our attention. Chapter 6. Marries. Jesus marries. He visits India. Yeah, this sounds like a modern wants to reshape Jesus into some image that fits this person's desires to show Jesus just like any other guy. Now this caught my eye, verse 5 in that section. A certain prophet, seeing him, said unto him, behold, the love and the wisdom of God are one in thee. Therefore, in the age to come, thou shalt be called Jesu Maria, for by the Christ shall God save mankind, which now is verily as the bitterness of the sea. So notice this prophet isn't named. So it's what? Garbage. Doesn't mean anything. Couldn't verify who he is. Couldn't verify he's a prophet. Kind of a clue that, Doug, why were you even reading this and not taking it seriously for a little while? This was a long time ago. And for the longest time while I was reading it, I think when I said this cannot be the correct gospel, and I started being skeptical, is when I read this. So I did eventually become skeptical when it says, and in the 18th year of his age, Jesus was espoused unto Miriam, a virgin of the tribe of Judah, with whom he lived 7 years, and she died. For God took her, that he might go on, Jesus, might go on to higher things, which he had to do and suffer for the sons and daughters of men, as if the wife was in the way. Okay. And a couple of verses later, this is page 13 of the book, by the way, and after a time he went into Syria and India. That probably was another clue to my mind, like Jesus in India. And I know Indians like to think that sometimes, but I just don't think that happened. And he visited in their temples. Well, God, he visited their temples, which means he was going into pagan temples. Jesus, wow, that's crazy. Now, to show you some of the things that would pull you in to the fraud is you go, oh, I can see a quotation from the original Gospel of Matthew, and this is one of them. This was a verse that had been removed from our Bibles, and I found out later it was removed by Jerome in 405 AD, but it's in all the Greek and it's in all the Latin Vulgates before that. He comes out in 405, he says, nope, I'm going to take out this day I've begotten thee, because that's going to help the Ebionite position that Jesus was begotten as the Son of God at his baptism and not when he was born. And this is going to destroy the eternal Son doctrine, which we claim he's begotten, not made. So we're going to get rid of it, and he takes it out. But when I saw this, I go, oh my gosh, there it is. So this was in the Aramaic text this guy mentioned in the preface, the first paragraph, not later. I didn't read the whole preface when I first picked up this book. And so I'll go, oh, this is great. We can maybe persuade people if this book is true, if this guy's manuscript, this Aramaic manuscript can be proven that exists. I mean, if he found it, I'm sure he told people about it. I'm sure it's in some library or archive somewhere, you know. But again, when you see what all the layers of fraud here is, there is no manuscript and there's no backup and there's no proof. But this was one of the first verses I saw, and I go, oh, great. This could be helpful to prove people that Jesus, was told this over at the baptism. Here's page 29, and I didn't notice this at the time, but I'm just kind of shocked. Is verse 4 here says, after picking the 12, Jesus then picked 12 others to be prophets, men of light, and their names are very interesting. Hermes, Aristobulus, Selenius, Nereus, Apollos, Barsabbas. I mean, these are not very Jewish names. Hermes, for example, is Greek. Aristobulus is Greek. Selenius is Roman. Nereus, I think, is Roman. Apollos is definitely Greek and a god's name. Barsabbas, that could be, that's Bar, son of the rabbi, Rabbas. Andronicus, that's definitely Roman or Greek. Lucius is definitely Roman or Latin. Apelles, I'm not sure that you could put that anywhere, but it'd probably be Greek. Zacchaeus, that could be Hebrew. Urbanus, that's definitely a Roman Latin name. Clementos, again, a Latin name. Clement means peaceful. And then in Latin, and he called the 12 and then he called 12 who should be evangelists and 12 who should be called pastors. A fourfold 12 did he call. I mean, this is just right out of a fantasy book. This has no bearing on reality. It's just made up stuff. Totally concocted. And I want to show you another example where this person picks up on those. I told you there were 49 quotes discovered by 1902 from the Hebrew Matthew. You could find 22 in Jerome's commentaries, and then the other 27 were sprinkled in various sources, like Epiphanius quoting it in the Panarion several times, 4 or 5 there, Origen a couple times, I think Justin once or twice. So, I mean, you've got 49 quotes, and you start seeing quotes that are right out of the Hebrew Matthew. And here's one. For Jesus talks about, I will tell you unto 70 times 7, this is about how much to forgive. And then incongruously just sticks in, the next part is from the Hebrew Matthew. For even in the prophets, after they had been anointed by the Holy Spirit, the prophets had uttered utterances of sin, or utterance of sin could be found. Jesus was making the point that just because a prophet is a prophet doesn't mean he can't sin again. He's no longer a sinner. So, and that's, by the way, something we sometimes forget. So that quote comes right out of the Hebrew Matthew, and only the Hebrew Matthew. Okay, and critics of the Hebrew Matthew attributed this quote to the Hebrew Matthew. It could be legitimate or it could be an exaggeration, but here's the principle. So this is from the Hebrew Matthew inside this Gospel of 12. And if you cease not offering and eating of flesh and blood, the wrath of God shall not cease from you. Okay, so again, it makes you, if you know what the Hebrew Matthew is allegedly attributed to it, then you would say this would confirm was really from them, because this claims to be the Aramaic text of the Gospel, meaning a Hebrew language type Gospel. So this was could again be important to prove that, Jesus said this in the Hebrew Gospel, because here it is in the Gospel of the 12, which claims to be based on an Aramaic text. Well, that's what it sounded like in the first paragraph of the original preface of 1902. Okay, and lastly, just the last slide is, here's another quote right out of the Hebrew Matthew. So if you, so they're showing you legitimate quotes from the Hebrew Matthew, and they're pointing it off and making you think it was from an Aramaic text found in India, and therefore if you're trying to find out what does the Hebrew Matthew say, you go, hey, maybe this guy Osley didn't know this is in the Hebrew Matthew. This will confirm those other passages that are quoted by Epiphanius or whatever source text. So Jesus did say this in the Hebrew Matthew, apparently. And I say unto you, though you be gathered together in my bosom, if you keep not my commandments, I will cast you forth. For if you keep not the lesser mysteries, who shall give you the greater? That's attributed to Jesus in the Hebrew Matthew. Okay, so again, this would be, a confirmation of that. And so the human temptation is, okay, I've just found more proof. If this guy's whole story is correct, that he found this in an Aramaic text, well, this would be helpful towards proving to people, or to convince people, that we need to follow or include or restore these words to the current Gospel of Matthew. But this is not a valid source text anymore. This is a completely fraudulent book, and it fits within the Matthew 24 prophecy that you will not pay attention to anyone who says they met me in a private room, or people who claim they have a scroll in a private room that has my words on it that you haven't seen before, and tells you I've been married for 7 years to some woman named Miriam. So anyway, I hope those who have been taken in by this fraud will, accept my lovingly telling you that this is a fraud, and to just run away from it, throw it all away, delete it, forget it. It didn't happen. This is an attempt to lead people astray, to find another Christ, which is a Christ who's been married before, who appoints pastors and prophets and all these nonsensical things and whatever else they're trying to purvey through the book. I'm not going to sit here and try to figure out what their unusual doctrines are, but I'm sure there's going to be stuff in here. So, by the way, it just so echoes the Mormon thing with Joseph Smith and having witnesses. And so this guy's just copying that whole thing, and the Mormons probably have been very successful. Maybe Mr. Osley in Europe was trying to do this. He's an Irish priest who does the same thing as one of our American groups do, the Mormon Church. You create a mystery that you've been revealed something in private. It violates Matthew 24. You're trying to bring us in different Christ. It's Christ appearing to you, or people who are agents of Christ appearing to you and telling you, a whole new Bible. And here it is. And so, boom, it comes out almost like the authorized version of the Bible, with a lot of these changes or emendations, we call them. You amend the text. Anyway, I hope this helps everybody. God bless. Take care. Ciao. Bye.